The autumn rain pounds Central City like bullets against concrete, each droplet exploding into fragments on the slick streets. I grip the steering wheel as my wipers work overtime, their rhythmic scraping barely keeping pace with the downpour. Through the passenger window, the city blurs into watercolor streaks of neon and shadow. "Barry, you're driving like you're heading to a funeral," Grandma Nora says, her voice carrying that familiar warmth I've anchored myself to for years. She adjusts the small brooch on her best coat, the same one Mom wore to church every Sunday. "It's just dinner with your father." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Just dinner. If only it were that simple. At 80, she still carries herself with dignity that comes from weathering every storm life could throw at her. Her silver hair is pulled back in the same neat bun she's worn for decades, and despite the rain-soaked evening ahead, there's excitement in her pale blue eyes. "When's the last time Dad invited us anywhere?" I ask, navigating around a puddle deep enough to swallow a small car. He doesn't do family dinners. He does networking events with a side of blood relations. She pats my hand with surprisingly warm fingers. "Your father's still my boy, even if he's forgotten where he came from. Maybe he's trying to remember." Through the rain-streaked windshield, I catch my first glimpse of Riverside Manor's amber lights spilling onto the wet sidewalk. Even through the storm, I can see well-dressed figures moving behind floor-to-ceiling windows like actors on a stage. My stomach tightens. "Fancy," Grandma Nora murmurs. But there's no intimidation in her voice, just the observation of someone who's seen enough of life to know that expensive doesn't always mean better. Inside, warmth hits us after the October chill, all polished wood and soft jazz piano. Henry approaches with his practiced smile, the one he wears like armor. Behind him, a table of well-dressed colleagues turn to watch our reunion with polite curiosity. "Mom, you look wonderful," he says, though I notice he doesn't quite meet her eyes. "Come, let me introduce you to some colleagues." The table is positioned perfectly in the dining room's center, where conversations can be overheard and appearances noted. Dr. Rebecca Martinez from Central City General sits to Henry's right, along with Dr. James Murphy and his wife, plus Dr. Lisa Chen, and someone Henry introduces as a potential research partner. "So, Mrs. Allen, Henry tells us you've lived in Central City your whole life." "Born and raised, back when downtown was nothing but family shops and everyone knew their neighbors' middle names." The table chuckles politely, but I catch the slight tightening around Henry's eyes. He launches into hospital research initiatives, steering towards safer territory. For a while it works. Talk flows around medical journals and conferences, while Grandma Nora listens with patient attention. Then Dr. Murphy asks about Henry's background. "Henry was such a serious boy," Grandma Nora says, cutting her salmon with precision. "Even as a teenager, nose in medical books. Though I'll never forget the summer he worked at Murphy's Diner and came home every night smelling like grease and complaining about sore feet." The table erupts in laughter. Dr. Chen leans forward with interest. "A diner? That's wonderful, so grounded." Henry's smile doesn't reach his eyes. "That was a long time ago." But Grandma Nora is warming up. "Oh, he hated it at first. All those orders to remember, running around with coffee pots. But by summer's end, he was their best waiter. Tips were good, too. Henry always had a way with people when he wasn't trying to impress them." The last part lands with surgical precision. I see Henry's jaw tighten, his fork pausing halfway to his mouth. The tension reaches its breaking point during dessert. Grandma Nora mentions Henry's acceptance to State University instead of the Ivy League school he'd hoped for. "Of course, State turned out perfect for him," she says, enjoying her crème brûlée. "Sometimes what we think we want isn't what we need. Henry learned more about real people at State than he ever would have at some fancy school where everyone came from the same background." Dr. Chen and Dr. Murphy exchange glances, professional assessment happening when someone's credentials are being quietly reevaluated. Henry sets down his coffee cup with deliberate control. "Mother," he says, voice low but carrying across nearby tables, "I think you've shared enough family history for one evening." Conversation dies like a radio being switched off. "Henry, I was just—" "I know what you were just doing." His voice is still quiet, but there's coldness that makes my blood run ice water. "You've always had opinions about my choices, haven't you? About where I went to school, about the life I've built." "Henry," Grandma Nora says gently, "I'm proud of everything you've accomplished. You were just reminding everyone here that I come from nothing special, that I'm not the colleague they thought they were dining with." He glances around the table, cataloging subtle changes in their expressions. "Maybe you should head home now. Since you're so independent and have such strong opinions about everything, I'm sure you can get yourself home just fine." The words hit like a slap. Grandma Nora sits perfectly still, her pale blue eyes studying her son's face with devastating clarity. Then, with dignity that's carried her through 80 decades, she sets down her napkin and reaches for her purse. "Of course, dear. I can manage." I'm half out of my chair. "Grandma, wait! I'll drive you." "No, Barry. Your father arranged this dinner. You should stay and enjoy it." Henry doesn't look up as she walks away, but I catch him watching her reflection in the darkened window as she steps into the rain and disappears into sheets of water within seconds. Conversation limps back to life after Grandma Nora leaves, but it feels forced. I sit carved from stone, watching rain streak down windows and thinking about my 80-year-old grandmother walking alone through Central City's storm-soaked streets. My phone buzzes. "Iris, how's dinner going?" "Long story. We'll call you later." "Everything okay? You sound tense." I slip away from the table and step into the restaurant's entryway. Through glass doors, the parking lot has turned into a shallow lake. I dial Grandma Nora's number, straight to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Nora Allen. I'm probably in the garden or making trouble somewhere." I try again. Still voicemail. Through the windows, Henry is gesturing as he tells some story, his earlier coldness replaced by animated charm. When he catches me looking, I mouth, "Work call." He turns back to his audience, moving past what happened, as if sending his 80-year-old mother into a storm was just a minor social hiccup. Iris texts, "Any look reaching her?" No answer. Probably just can't hear the phone. "Where did she go? I can swing by and check." "She was planning to take the bus from downtown, Route 23. On it. We'll text when I find her." But as I watch the storm intensify outside, all I can think about is how small Grandma Nora looked walking away, and how the rain seemed to swallow her whole. 20 minutes later, I can't sit still anymore. When Dr. Martinez mentions they should call it an evening due to weather, I practically leap at the excuse to leave. "She's fine," Henry says as the group disperses. "She's tougher than you think." The casual dismissal hits like a physical blow. "She's 80 years old, Dad, and you sent her out into this." "I didn't send her anywhere. She chose to leave." I don't trust myself to respond without saying something that will damage what's left of our relationship. The rain hits me like ice water. Within seconds, I'm soaked through, wading through ankle-deep water to reach my car. My phone rings as I'm pulling out. "Iris." "I'm at the Route 23 stop on Central and 5th, she says, concern evident. "Barry, the buses stopped running 20 minutes ago. Too much flooding." The knot in my stomach tightens. If the buses stopped running, Grandma Nora would be stranded downtown in the worst storm Central City has seen in months. Joe texts, "Heard from Iris you're looking for your grandmother. Want me to put out a bolo?" "Maybe wait another hour? Don't want to overreact." No such thing when it comes to family. He's right. I call him directly and give him the basics. Within minutes, the CCPD family is mobilizing. Joe coordinating search zones, Cisco pulling traffic cam footage, Iris working with dispatch. "Family takes care of family, Barry, always," Joe says. As I navigate flooded streets, my phone lights up with coordination messages. Somewhere in this storm, Grandma Nora is alone, and every minute that passes makes finding her harder. The clock reads 10:47 p.m. She's been missing for over an hour. I press the accelerator and head into the night. The rain has turned Central City's downtown into a maze of rushing water and blurred streetlights. I've been searching for over an hour, moving block by block through the flooded streets between Riverside Manor and Grandma Nora's apartment, when I see something that makes my blood freeze in my veins. Caught on the rusted corner of a dumpster in the narrow alley between Murphy's Hardware and an abandoned dry cleaner is a piece of blue fabric that I would recognize in my sleep. Her scarf. The delicate one with tiny embroidered flowers that my mother gave her for Christmas 15 years ago, back when our family still felt like a family. I'm out of my car and splashing through ankle-deep water before my mind catches up to my body. The alley is narrow and dark, lit only by a flickering streetlight that casts dancing shadows on the wet brick walls. The scarf is completely soaked, heavy with rainwater, and there's a small tear where it caught on the metal edge. Not large enough to suggest violence, but enough to tell me she was here, that something made her turn down this forgotten passage between buildings. When I lift the fabric free, I catch the faint scent of White Shoulder's perfume beneath the overwhelming smell of rain and urban decay. The same fragrance she's worn for 30 years, now mixed with the cold night air and my growing terror. "Joe," I say into my phone, my voice tight with controlled panic, "I found her scarf." "Where?" "Alley behind Murphy's Hardware on Industrial Avenue. Caught on a dumpster." I look around the narrow space, noting the scattered debris and overflowing trash bins. "She was here, Joe. Something made her turn down this alley. Could be looking for shelter from the rain. That area floods hard when the storm drains overflow." The alley opens onto Riverside Street, and when I emerge from between the buildings, I'm hit with the full force of the storm again. This part of downtown is rougher even in good weather. Pawn shops and check-cashing places instead of restaurants. Bus stops with broken glass instead of well-maintained taxi stands. At night, in a storm like this, it's exactly where I don't want my 80-year-old grandmother to be wandering alone. A young man smoking under the pawn shop's overhang calls out to me. "You looking for someone?" I show him the photo on my phone. My grandmother, 80 years old, blue coat. He squints at the screen. "Yeah, I saw her maybe an hour ago. Asked about bus routes. I told her they weren't running because of flooding, but she headed toward the warehouse district anyway. Seemed determined to get home." The warehouse district. My stomach drops. During the day, it's busy with delivery trucks. At night, especially in weather like this, it's the kind of place where someone could disappear completely.
"If police come by, tell them what you told me," I say, already moving toward my car. As I drive north toward the industrial area, my phone buzzes with updates from Cisco. Camera footage showing Grandma Nora moving deeper into the part of Central City where the old manufacturing buildings stand mostly empty, where someone could call for help and never be heard. Somewhere in that maze of abandoned concrete and steel, my grandmother is alone in the storm. I press the accelerator and race into the darkness. The warehouse district at night feels like stepping into the end of the world. Massive concrete buildings loom on either side of Factory Street, their broken windows staring down like dead eyes. And the rain here seems even more violent, driven by wind that whistles between the industrial structures and turns every corner into a wind tunnel that threatens to knock me off my feet. I park where Cisco last tracked her on the security cameras and step out into the storm, immediately soaked despite my jacket. The water here is deeper than downtown, mid-calf in some places, and I can hear the sound of overwhelmed storm drains gurgling and backing up somewhere in the darkness ahead. "Barry," Cisco's voice crackles through my phone's speaker as I begin checking the buildings along the street. "I've got her on 3 more cameras heading north on Industrial Boulevard, but the last clear image I have is from 10:31 p.m. at Factory and Riverside. After that, the rain's too heavy to make out anything useful." "That's less than 30 minutes ago," I say, more to myself than to him. She can't have gotten far. But 30 minutes in weather like this, at her age, with limited visibility and flooded streets that would challenge someone half her age, the possibilities running through my mind are all bad. Most of the buildings are locked up tight, their loading docks secured with heavy chains and padlocks that have clearly been there for years. But some of the older structures have been abandoned long enough that their security has failed. Boarded windows with gaps where the plywood has warped, doors that hang crooked on broken hinges, fencing that's been cut or climbed so many times that it's more suggestion than barrier. I'm checking my fourth building, a former textile factory with broken windows on the ground floor, when I hear something that stops me cold in the middle of the sidewalk. It's faint, almost lost in the cacophony of rain and wind, but unmistakable once you know to listen for it. Someone calling for help. "Hello?" I shout back, pressing my face to one of the gaps in the boarded windows. "Is someone in there?" The response comes immediately, and my knees nearly buckle with relief and terror in equal measure. "Barry? Barry, is that you?" It's her voice. Tired, scared, but definitely alive. "Grandma, it's me. I'm coming in." The gap in the plywood is just wide enough for me to squeeze through, though I leave a good portion of my jacket behind on a protruding nail. Inside, the building is pitch black except for the faint light filtering through the damaged windows, and the sound of rain on the deteriorating roof creates a deafening percussion that makes it hard to think clearly. "I'm over here," her voice calls from somewhere deeper in the building, toward what looks like it used to be the administrative offices. "But Grandma, I think I hurt my ankle." I follow the sound, stepping carefully over debris and puddles, my phone's flashlight revealing the skeleton of what used to be a thriving factory. Old industrial sewing machines sit covered in rust and decades of dust, and the floor is littered with broken glass and chunks of concrete that have fallen from the failing ceiling. Finally, my light finds her. Grandma Nora is sitting on the floor near what used to be a foreman's office, her back against a concrete pillar and her right leg extended at an awkward angle. Her coat is soaked through, her normally perfect hair is plastered to her head, and when she sees me, her face crumples with relief and embarrassment that breaks my heart into fragments. "Oh, Barry," she says, her voice breaking, "I'm so sorry. I got turned around in the rain, saw this place was open, thought I could wait out the storm. But when I was trying to find somewhere dry to sit, I stepped wrong and—" "Don't apologize," I tell her, kneeling beside her in the puddle-strewn debris. "I'll always find you, Grandma. Always." Getting Grandma Nora out of the abandoned factory and into my car feels like the longest 10 minutes of my life. Her ankle is worse than she initially let on. She can barely put any weight on it at all, and by the time I help her settle into the passenger seat with the heater running full blast, she's shivering uncontrollably despite the blanket I keep in my trunk for exactly these kinds of emergencies. "I'm fine, Barry," she insists through chattering teeth, but the pallor of her skin and the way she's favoring her right leg tell a different story. "You're not fine, and there's no fuss," I reply, cranking the heat up as high as it will go and pulling out my phone to call Joe. "You're hurt, you've been missing for over an hour, and you're going to the hospital whether you like it or not." By the time we reach Central City General, Joe's units have set up what looks like a small command post in the emergency room parking lot. Red and blue lights cut through the diminishing rain, and I can see Joe himself standing next to his patrol car, coordinating with dispatch while keeping one eye on the hospital entrance. He spots my headlights and waves me toward the emergency bay, jogging over despite the rain as soon as I park. "Thank God," he says as I help Grandma Nora out of the passenger seat. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" "Just a twisted ankle and some wounded pride," but she leans heavily on my arm as she speaks, and I can see Joe cataloging the way she's moving, or rather not moving, on that right foot.
"Let's get you inside where it's warm," he says, and within minutes, the emergency room staff has taken over with the kind of efficient competence that makes me grateful to live in a city with good hospitals and people who know their jobs. Grandma Nora ends up in a wheelchair with an ice pack on her ankle, wrapped in heated blankets that the triage nurse provided, along with a cup of tea that's probably terrible, but at least warm. She looks small sitting there in the hospital's standard issue wheelchair, smaller than I usually let myself notice, but her eyes are alert, and she's already started making dry observations about the other patients in the waiting area. "That young man over there," she murmurs to me, nodding toward a college-aged kid holding an ice pack to his head, "clearly thought he could skateboard in the rain. And that couple by the vending machine? Date night gone wrong. Look at how he keeps apologizing." Despite everything, I smile. Even injured and exhausted and soaked to the skin, she's still noticing people, still engaging with the world around her instead of retreating into self-pity. Cecile arrives just as the doctor is explaining that they want to keep Grandma Nora overnight for observation, standard procedure for someone her age who's been missing in severe weather. She takes one look at the situation and immediately moves into what I think of as her professional mode, reading emotions and undercurrents with the precision of someone who's made a career of understanding what people aren't saying out loud.
"How are you feeling, Mrs. Allen?" she asks, settling into a chair next to the wheelchair. "Like an old fool who should have known better than to go wandering around in a thunderstorm," Grandma Nora replies. But there's something in her tone that suggests she's not just talking about getting lost. Cecile nods slowly, her empathic abilities clearly picking up layers of emotion that go deeper than physical discomfort. Sometimes we end up in storms we didn't expect, and we just have to find our way through them as best we can. The question is whether the people who should be helping us are willing to get a little wet, Grandma Nora says quietly, and I know she's not talking about the weather anymore. "Speaking of which," Cecile says gently, "Barry, have you called your father?" The question I've been avoiding all evening. I look at Grandma Nora, who's watching me with those sharp blue eyes that seem to see straight through to my soul. "I should," I say finally. "Should you?" she asks, echoing Cecile's tone. "Or do you think you should because that's what good sons are supposed to do, regardless of whether their fathers have earned that consideration?" It's a question that cuts straight to the heart of everything I've been feeling since this nightmare began, and I realize I don't have a good answer. I step into the hospital corridor for privacy, my reflection ghost-like in the rain-streaked windows. The storm is finally beginning to weaken, but I can still hear thunder rumbling in the distance like an angry god refusing to give up the fight. My hands shake slightly as I scroll through my contacts, Henry's name glowing on the screen like an accusation. I dial before I can talk myself out of it. The phone rings 4 times before he answers, and when his voice comes through the speaker, it's thick with what might be sleep or something stronger. "Barry? Christ, what time is it?" "It's past midnight," I say, watching a maintenance worker mop the corridor floor with the kind of methodical precision that comes from doing the same job for years. "I'm calling about your mother." "My mother's been dead for 15 years, Barry." The words hit me like a slap, not because they're wrong, but because of how he says them. Dismissive, irritated, as if I'm bothering him with irrelevant ancient history instead of current family crisis. "Grandma Nora, Dad, your mother who's still breathing. Remember her? The woman you sent out into a storm tonight because she embarrassed you in front of your colleagues?" Silence. Long enough that I start to wonder if the connection is dropped. In the background, I can hear the faint sound of a television, some late-night talk show with canned laughter that sounds obscene, given what we're discussing. "Is she all right?" he asks finally, his voice smaller now, uncertain. "She's in the hospital. Sprained ankle, possible fracture. She got lost trying to find her way home after you told her to leave, took shelter in an abandoned building, and fell while trying to find somewhere dry to wait out the storm."
I let that sit between us for a moment. Let him picture his 80-year-old mother alone and injured in a derelict factory while he was probably at home watching television and congratulating himself on salvaging his dinner party. Which hospital? Central City General Emergency Room first, then they're moving her to room 314 for overnight observation. I pause, giving him the opportunity to say he's on his way, that he was wrong earlier and that he wants to make this right. Instead, I get more silence. Joe West is handling the paperwork, since she was technically a missing person for 3 hours. Joe West? My boss at the CCPD, my friend, the man who helped coordinate the search when you were too busy protecting your reputation to care whether your mother made it home safely. Barry, that's not fair. I didn't know the weather was going to get that bad.
You didn't know because you didn't want to know. I'm pacing now, my footsteps echoing in the empty corridor as anger and exhaustion war for control of my voice. You were so focused on damage control, so worried about what your precious colleagues might think that it never occurred to you to check the weather forecast before sending an elderly woman out into the night. She insisted she could manage. She's 80 years old. The words explode out of me before I can moderate my tone, and I have to pause when a passing nurse glances in my direction with concern. She weighs maybe 110 pounds, soaking wet, which she literally was tonight. She could have been killed, Dad. Hypothermia, a fall, getting mugged in that part of town. Any number of things could have happened to her.
You're being dramatic.
Am I? Because Joe West, a man with 25 years of police experience, told me that what you did tonight was unacceptable, family or not. I stop pacing and lean against the corridor wall, suddenly exhausted by the conversation and everything it represents. When's the last time you visited her just because you wanted to see her? Not a holiday, not a birthday, not some obligation, just because you missed her. The question hangs in the air like a challenge, and the silence that follows tells me everything I need to know.
I don't remember, he admits quietly.
I do. 2 years ago, right after your medical license was reinstated, you brought her daffodils from the hospital gift shop and told her about your first day back at work. She cried, Dad. She actually cried because she was so proud of you for never giving up, for fighting to clear your name and rebuild your life. I can hear his breathing change, becoming irregular, and when he speaks again, his voice is barely above a whisper. I remember. Do you remember what you did next? You spent 45 minutes talking about your 5-year career plan, your networking strategy, your image rehabilitation goals. The words taste bitter in my mouth. She wanted to celebrate who you'd become through all that suffering. You wanted to discuss who you were planning to become next.
I was excited about my future.
You were so busy building your future that you forgot to appreciate your present, so focused on becoming someone new that you rejected everyone who knew and loved you before.
I push away from the wall and start pacing again.
She doesn't care about your career accomplishments, Dad. She cares about you, the real you, not the carefully managed professional version you present to the world.
I don't know how to be anyone else anymore. The admission contains more vulnerability than I have heard from him in years, and for a moment I catch a glimpse of the man he might have been before prison hardened him into someone who values perception over connection. You could start by showing up, I tell him gently. Room 314. She'll probably be awake for another hour. Barry, what if she doesn't want to see me after tonight? She's your mother, Dad. She'll always want to see you. The question is whether you want to see her badly enough to swallow your pride and admit you made a mistake. Room 314? Room 314. The choice is yours. I hang up before he can respond, my hands trembling as I slip the phone back into my pocket, wondering if I've just opened a door or burned a bridge forever. The next morning dawns with the kind of brilliant clarity that only comes after a storm has washed the world clean.
Sunlight streams through Grandma Nora's hospital room window in golden ribbons, illuminating dust motes that dance in the air like tiny celebrations of survival. When I arrive with coffee from the good place downtown and fresh flowers from the gift shop, I find her sitting up in bed looking remarkably well for someone who spent half the night in an emergency room after being rescued from an abandoned factory.
"You look better," I say, arranging the yellow chrysanthemums in the plastic vase on her bedside table. Yellow has always been her favorite color. Sunshine and optimism made tangible. "I feel better." Amazing what a good night's sleep can do, even in a hospital bed. She accepts the coffee gratefully and takes a careful sip, her eyes closing briefly in appreciation. Though I have to say, hospital coffee has not improved since the last time I was here. When was the last time? When you were born, actually. I spent 3 days camped out in the maternity waiting area, driving the nurses crazy with my hovering and my endless questions about whether you were eating enough. She smiles at the memory. Your mother kept telling me to go home and rest, but I couldn't bear the thought of not being there if you needed anything. The image makes me smile. Grandma Nora, as a younger woman then, probably in her 50s then, pacing the hospital corridors and interrogating medical staff about the well-being of a grandson she'd only just met. Some things, apparently, never change. Speaking of hovering, I say, settling into the chair beside her bed, how are you feeling about having a professional hoverer for the next few weeks while your ankle heals? Professional hoverer? I'm taking time off work to make sure you don't do anything stupid like try to tend your garden on crutches or climb ladders to change light bulbs. She gives me a look that suggests she was absolutely planning to do both of those things. Barry, I've been taking care of myself for 80 years. I think I can manage a sprained ankle. And I've been worrying about you for 28 years. Humor me. We sit in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the sounds of the hospital waking up around us. The soft ding of elevators, conversations between medical staff, and the distant sound of breakfast carts being wheeled through corridors. Normal sounds of normal institutional life that feel almost surreal after the intensity of the previous night. "Did he come?" I asked, finally, the question I've been avoiding since I walked into the room. Grandma Nora sets down her coffee cup and looks out the window at Central City spread below us, all clean streets and morning sunshine. "He did." "And?" "He talked. He apologized." She's quiet for a moment, choosing her words with the care of someone who's learned that words have weight and consequences. "Barry, your father has spent so many years trying to become someone else that I'm not sure he remembers who he used to be. Last night, for a few minutes, I saw glimpses of the boy I raised, the one who cried when he stepped on a butterfly by accident, who gave his lunch money to classmates who forgot theirs, who wanted to be a doctor because he thought he could fix everything that was broken in the world. But glimpses aren't the same as permanent change, and wanting to be better isn't the same as doing the work required to actually become better." She reaches over and covers my hand with hers, her skin warm now instead of the frightening cold it was last night. "He's hurt, Barry. Has been for years probably, since before he went to prison. But hurt people who refuse to acknowledge their pain tend to spread that hurt around, usually to the people who love them most. So what happens now? Now, we see if he's willing to do the hard work of rebuilding what's been broken. Real work, not just apologies and promises." She squeezes my hand. "And we accept that we can't do that work for him, no matter how much we might want to." Dr. Patel appears in the doorway with a clipboard and the kind of smile that suggests good news. "Mrs. Allen, I have your discharge paperwork ready.
The x-rays show a moderate sprain, but no fracture. You'll need to stay off the ankle as much as possible for 2 to 3 weeks, use crutches when you absolutely have to walk, and follow up with your regular doctor in 10 days.
3 weeks? Grandma Nora looks horrified. Doctor, I have a garden to tend and a life to live. I can't be laid up for 3 weeks. The garden will wait, I tell her firmly, and your life will be exactly where you left it when your ankle heals. You've never been good at sitting still either, you know. You get that from me. Then it's about time we both learned. As we go through the discharge process, signing forms, scheduling follow-up appointments, collecting medications and instructions, I think about the conversation I had with Henry last night and whether anything has really changed. Part of me hopes that seeing Grandma Nora in a hospital bed, confronting the reality of how close we came to losing her, might have shocked him into recognizing what he's been throwing away all these years. But a larger part of me has learned not to hope for transformations that might never come. Ready to go home? I ask, as a nurse helps her transfer from the hospital bed to a wheelchair for the trip to the car. More than ready. She looks up at me with eyes that are bright with affection and something that might be pride. Thank you, Barry, for everything, for not giving up, for coming to find me, for being exactly who you are. Thank you for letting me find you. Always, she says simply. And in that one word, I hear a promise that goes both ways, that she'll always be there for me to find, and that I'll always come looking. Always. As we leave Central City General, I think about promises and family and the quiet heroism of choosing love over pride, presence over perfection. And I realize that sometimes the most important rescues aren't the dramatic ones that make headlines. Sometimes they're as simple as showing up when someone needs you and refusing to give up until everyone gets home safely. Outside, Central City is cleaning itself up from the storm, and the sun is shining on a world that looks washed clean and full of new possibilities. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it'll take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.